The millionaire accidentally entered the kitchen and found his new chef crying. The truth broke his heart. What he was about to discover would forever change the destiny of two souls marked by abandonment. In the luxurious kitchen of that mansion in Miami Beach, between aromas of freshly baked apple pie and the sound of contained tears, two completely opposite worlds were about to collide. He, with his impeccable suit and blue eyes loaded with secrets. She, with her trembling hands, green eyes that couldn't hide invisible scars, and a dark family past that threatened to destroy this accidental encounter. What dark truths were hidden behind the glass walls that separated the powerful tycoon from the young chef? How could someone who had grown up among necessities understand the whispers and shadows that tormented the man everyone feared in business circles? While the aroma of coffee mixed with the palpable tension between them, neither imagined that their broken hearts, apparently incompatible, contained exactly the pieces the other needed to heal, demonstrating that sometimes true value isn't in what we possess, but in the secrets we dare to share. The rain beat furiously against the windows of the luxurious restaurant when Emily Johnson, with trembling hands, collected the pieces of china she had just broken. The contemptuous looks from customers seemed to pierce her skin while the manager approached with firm steps, his face red with barely contained rage. The corpulent man stopped in front of her, projecting his threatening shadow over the young woman kneeling. "It's the third time this week, Emily. This comes out of your salary." The man's voice echoed throughout the hall, while she, kneeling over the porcelain fragments, felt something else breaking inside her chest. The customers' murmurs intensified. Some even took out their phones to capture her humiliation. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," Emily murmured, trying to keep her voice from breaking. Her fingers hurriedly collected the fragments, ignoring the small cut that began to bleed on her right palm. I'm sorry, I'm sorry," the manager mocked with a taunting tone. "That doesn't pay for the French china you just destroyed. At this rate, you'll work for free the entire month." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, containing the tears that threatened to overflow. She couldn't allow herself to cry, couldn't allow herself to lose this job. Her mother needed the medicines and treatment she could barely afford, with 3 simultaneous jobs. Suddenly, a firm hand appeared in front of her. Looking up, Emily found herself with penetrating blue eyes that observed her with a mixture of curiosity and compassion. They belonged to a tall and elegant man, whose custom-made suit brutally contrasted with the simple waitress uniform she wore. His face, with perfectly sculpted features, showed an indecipherable expression that made Emily's heart skip an inexplicable beat. "Allow me to help you," he said with a deep voice, a voice accustomed to giving orders and being obeyed. At that moment, neither of them imagined that this accidental encounter would change their lives forever. Michael Davis, owner of the Davis Corporate Group and one of the most powerful and enigmatic men in America, had entered the restaurant looking for a quiet place to review some documents. He didn't expect to end the night helping a waitress in trouble, much less being captivated by green eyes full of contained bravery and silent pain. Something in that gaze reminded him of himself years ago when he fought to maintain the family empire after the betrayal that had shattered his trust in the world. "It's not necessary for you to help me, sir," Emily whispered, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. A strand of her light brown hair had escaped from her bun, falling over her fair-skinned face. "Helping those in need is part of my job," he replied with barely perceptible smile that contrasted with the usual coldness of his gaze. For a second, their fingers touched his as they grabbed the same fragment, sending an electric current through both their skins. The manager, immediately recognizing the powerful businessman, changed his despotic attitude to a servile one that was almost comical in its abruptness. "Mr. Davis, what a surprise to have you in our humble establishment. Excuse this incident. The girl is new and deserves to be treated with respect," Michael completed with a cutting tone, slowly standing while helping Emily to her feet. I'd like to speak with you privately, right now." The authority in his voice admitted no reply. The manager visibly paled while the customers, now aware of the mysterious man's identity, observed the scene with renewed interest. "Please, Mr. Davis, this way," the manager stammered, pointing to his office. Before following him, Michael turned to Emily. "Are you okay?" he asked with genuine concern, noticing the small cut on her palm. "Yes, it's nothing," she replied, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you. What's your name?" he asked. "Emily. Emily Johnson," she answered, wondering why this powerful man was interested in a simple waitress. "Emily," he repeated as if savoring each syllable. "A pleasure to meet you. Don't leave until I return, please." With those enigmatic words, Michael followed the nervous manager to the office, leaving Emily confused and the other employees looking at her with a mixture of envy and curiosity. Minutes later, which seemed eternal to Emily, the manager returned with an indecipherable expression. Beside him, Michael maintained his serene and dominant posture. "Miss Johnson," the manager began with a tense voice, "starting tomorrow, you'll be transferred to the special events area with a considerable salary increase. Mr. Davis suggested that your skills would be better utilized there." Emily looked at Michael with incredulity, unable to process what she had just heard. Why was this man, this complete stranger, interceding for her like this? "But Mr. Thompson, I don't have experience in special events," she protested weakly, more from confusion than modesty. "You'll learn," the manager replied dryly. "Now you can leave for today. Tomorrow we expect you at 9 a.m. at the central office for your new orientation." While the other employees hurriedly returned to their tasks, Michael approached Emily. From his pocket, he took out a business card which he extended to her. With an elegant gesture, "If you have any problems with the transfer, call me directly," he said in a low voice, only for her ears. "Sometimes second chances are what make the difference in life, Miss Johnson." Before she could thank him properly, he was already heading to the exit, leaving behind an aura of mystery and a trail of his expensive cologne that Emily unconsciously inhaled. That night, while returning to her small shared apartment in a humble neighborhood of Miami, Emily couldn't stop thinking about those blue eyes that seemed to guard as many secrets as her own. Who was Michael Davis, really? And why did he take an interest in helping her? The business card, simple and elegant, seemed to burn in her uniform pocket, an unexpected passport to a world completely different from hers. If you're enjoying this story of overcoming and true love, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Tell us in the comments what city you're watching us from. We'd love to get to know you. Now continue discovering what will happen with Emily and this mysterious man. Meanwhile, in his luxury apartment with a panoramic view of the city, Michael Davis contemplated the night lights of Miami with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He didn't understand why that green-eyed waitress had captured his attention so intensely. There was something in her gaze, a mixture of vulnerability and iron determination, that seemed hypnotically familiar to him. "Have you investigated the girl already?" he asked without turning around, conscious of the presence of Jake Martinez, his personal assistant and friend since university, who had just silently entered the apartment. "I'm on it," Jake replied, approaching with a calm step. "But may I ask what's special about this waitress for the great Michael Davis, known for his business coldness, to intervene personally?" Michael took a sip of his whiskey before responding. "I don't even know myself," he finally admitted. "I suppose I saw something in her eyes that reminded me of myself." Jake nodded without saying more. He knew his friend well enough to know that behind that apparent coldness hid a man wounded by betrayal, a man who had sworn never to trust again, but who ironically continued searching for something authentic in a world of falsehoods. Meanwhile, Emily arrived at her modest apartment where her roommate Sarah, an exuberant professional makeup artist, waited impatiently for the news. "Finally you're here. You have to tell me absolutely everything about this rumor that's circulating," Sarah exclaimed as soon as Emily crossed the door. "What rumor?" Emily asked, confused, leaving her worn bag on a chair. That Michael Davis himself intervened when Thompson was humiliating you. That he defended you in front of everyone and even got you a promotion. Everyone's talking about it in the restaurant staff WhatsApp groups. Emily sighed, letting herself fall onto the small sofa they shared. News travels fast, she murmured, still processing the night's events. So it's true? Sarah screamed, sitting beside her. You have to tell me every detail. How is he in person? They say his eyes are like ice, that he can destroy you with a look. They're blue, Emily replied thoughtfully, deep like the ocean. And yes, they're cold, but for a moment I saw something more there, something almost human. Sarah looked at her with wide eyes. You're totally enchanted, she declared with a mischievous smile. My best friend and America's most coveted and mysterious bachelor. This seems taken from one of those soap operas you love so much. Don't be silly, Emily protested, although her flushed cheeks betrayed her. He was just kind. Tomorrow he probably won't even remember me. But while preparing for sleep in the privacy of her small room, Emily took out the business card again. Michael Davis, she read in a whisper, running her fingers over the embossed letters. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to dream of something more than simple daily survival. What Emily couldn't imagine was that miles away, Michael was also thinking about her, about those green eyes that seemed to contain an entire universe of secrets to discover. Emily Johnson had learned from a very young age that life doesn't give anything for free. Born in a small town in rural Alabama, she had come to Miami pursuing the dream of studying culinary arts. At 25, she alternated between 3 jobs to pay rent and send money to her sick mother. Poverty and abandonment had been her first teachers, teaching her that in this world she could only trust herself. Her light brown hair fell in waves to the middle of her back, framing a face with delicate features and fair skin that contrasted with her expressive emerald green eyes, inherited from a grandmother she never knew. Her hands, though delicate in appearance, showed small scars and calluses that told the story of her constant effort. She wasn't aware of her beauty. Years of struggle had dimmed any vanity, replacing it with a silent determination that shone in her gaze. That morning, while preparing for her first day in special events, she tried to calm her nerves, thinking about the salary increase and what it would mean for her mother's treatment. In front of the mirror, she put her hair in an elegant bun, applied a touch of lip gloss, and adjusted the impeccably ironed white blouse she had bought at a thrift store. It was the most formal thing she had. You're going to faint when you find out who you'll be organizing the next party for, exclaimed her roommate Sarah, entering the bathroom like a hurricane of energy with her vibrant red hair and impeccable makeup. She was Emily's antithesis in many ways, but their friendship had survived 3 years of coexistence and mutual support. For whom? Emily asked, distracted, struggling with the zipper of her new skirt, also from a thrift store, but perfectly adequate for her new position. For Michael Davis, America's most coveted bachelor, 33 years old, multimillionaire, and with a mysterious past that makes him irresistible, Sarah recited, as if reading a biographical file, leaning against the doorframe with a dreamy expression. They say that since his fiancée left him at the altar 3 years ago, he hasn't committed to anyone again. Only fleeting relationships, always with women he knows won't be able to cross his barriers. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. Destiny seemed to be playing with her, bringing her closer again to the blue-eyed man who had altered her world the night before. How do you know I'll be organizing his party? She asked, trying to make her voice sound casual. Because my friend Sophia works at the central office and told me last night. It seems it's a huge event, the 30th anniversary of Davis Group. All the big fish of American society will be there, and you, my dear friend, will be in the middle of all that. Glamour, Sarah replied, giving little jumps of excitement. Don't be ridiculous, Emily murmured, although her heart was beating uncontrollably. I'll surely just be another assistant serving appetizers or something like that. That's not what Sophia says. According to her, Michael Davis himself expressly asked that Miss Johnson be part of the main organizing team. Everyone's going crazy, wondering who you are and how you caught his attention. Sarah's words provoked a mixture of terror and emotion in Emily. Why did Michael Davis want her specifically at that event? Was it simple curiosity, or was there something more? "It's impossible that he's interested in me," she finally said, more to convince herself than Sarah. "He was just kind last night, probably out of simple courtesy." Sarah rolled her eyes dramatically. "Michael Davis isn't known precisely for his kindness or courtesy, friend. The man has a reputation for being cold as ice in business. Some even say that after his fiancée's betrayal, he simply stopped feeling." Emily finished getting ready in silence, thinking about the surreal nature of the situation. One day she was a simple waitress struggling to survive, and the next she was about to enter the exclusive world of the American elite, all thanks to a chance encounter with a man whose mere mention made experienced businessmen tremble. "Wish me luck," she finally said, grabbing her worn bag and heading to the door. "Conquer him, Tiger," Sarah exclaimed, with a mischievous smile. "And remember all the details to tell me later." Meanwhile, in the penthouse of one of the city's most exclusive buildings, Michael Davis contemplated the dawn with a cup of coffee in his hand. At 33, he had built a business empire that spanned hotels, restaurants, and real estate developments. His face, which regularly appeared on the covers of business magazines, showed perfect features, defined jaw, straight nose, and those intense blue eyes that seemed capable of piercing the soul of anyone who dared to sustain his gaze. However, loneliness was his only constant companion. The minimalist apartment, decorated in shades of grey and white, reflected his current personality: orderly, cold, with no place for the emotional chaos that had once almost destroyed him. "The report on the girl you had investigated is already in your email," Jake announced, entering the spacious living room with his tablet in hand. "May I ask why so much interest in a simple waitress?" Michael didn't respond immediately. Not even he understood why he couldn't get that green-eyed woman out of his mind. It was as if something in her had awakened an echo of his former self, the one who believed in people, in second chances, in authenticity. "I just want to make sure she's suitable for the new position," he lied, knowing Jake wouldn't believe it. After all, they had been friends since university, long before the Davis surname meant power and wealth. "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England," Jake mocked, leaving the tablet on the glass table. "Anyway, her story is quite common but impressive. Fatherless, sick mother, scholarship student for academic excellence in culinary arts, although she had to pause her studies due to economic problems. 3 simultaneous jobs, and not one complaint from her employers. The girl is an example of perseverance." Michael felt a strange tightness in his chest. Without knowing it, Emily had awakened something he believed dead long ago: curiosity about someone else, someone real, not just another of the beautiful but empty women who usually surrounded him at social events. "Any red flags? Something I should know?" he asked, maintaining his professional tone. Jake shook his head. "Nothing. Her record is completely clean. Good grades in university, excellent references from previous jobs, no legal problems. She lives with a roommate in a modest but decent neighborhood, regularly sends money to her mother in Alabama. At first glance, she seems to be exactly what she appears, a hard-working young woman struggling to get ahead." Michael nodded slightly, satisfied with the information. "I want her to be part of the main team for the anniversary event," he finally declared. Jake looked at him surprised. "Are you sure? She has no experience in events of this magnitude. Claudia will scream when she finds out." "Claudia works for me, not the other way around," Michael replied with a cutting tone. The mention of his public relations director always managed to irritate him. Despite her professional efficiency, the woman had a manipulative way of trying to interfere in his personal life that he found intolerable. "As you wish, boss," Jake conceded with a resigned smile. "Just don't say I didn't warn you about the approaching hurricane." That afternoon, when Emily arrived at the imposing glass tower that housed the central offices of Davis Group, she felt like she was entering a world completely alien to hers. The shining marble lobby, the elegantly dressed people, the security guards in immaculate suits. Everything screamed power and exclusivity. "Emily Johnson," she introduced herself timidly at the reception. "I'm here for the position in special events." The receptionist looked at her with poorly disguised curiosity. "Of course, Miss Johnson. They're waiting for you on the 20th floor. Claudia Vega will receive you personally." When she got off the elevator, Emily was greeted by an impressive woman, tall, thin, with an impeccable black pantsuit and a bun so perfect it seemed to defy gravity. Her face, though beautiful, showed a calculating coldness that made Emily tense instinctively. "So you're the new acquisition," Claudia said, examining her from head to toe with disdain, lingering on her worn bag and slightly scuffed shoes. "I hope you know that here we value discretion and efficiency. Mr. Davis doesn't tolerate mistakes." "I'll do my best, Mrs. Vega," Emily replied, feeling the woman's immediate hostility. "It's Miss," Claudia corrected coldly, "and you'd better remember that." For the next 2 hours, Claudia showed her the facilities and explained with a condescending tone the responsibilities of her new position. Emily absorbed every word, every detail, determined to prove she deserved this opportunity, even though she didn't fully understand why it had been granted to her. "The anniversary event is in exactly 2 months," Claudia explained as they entered a large conference room. "It will be the most important celebration of the year in the American business world. We can't afford even a single mistake." "I understand," Emily nodded, intimidated by the project's magnitude, but determined not to show it. "It's unlikely you truly understand the importance of this event, coming from where you come," Claudia commented with a cold smile. "But I suppose Michael saw something in you that the rest of us don't see." The way she pronounced those words was loaded with malicious insinuations that made Emily blush intensely. Before she could respond, the conference room door opened and Michael Davis entered with determined steps, followed by Jake and 2 other executives. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit that enhanced the color of his eyes, Michael emanated a natural authority that seemed to fill the entire room. For an instant, their gazes met, and she thought she saw a flash of something warm in those habitually cold eyes. "Welcome to the team, Miss Johnson," he said formally, extending his hand toward her. "I expect great things from you." When shaking his hand, Emily felt again that electric current, that inexplicable magnetism that seemed to connect them at a molecular level. "I won't disappoint you, Mr. Davis," she replied, raising her chin with determination. And so, between 2 people wounded by life, from completely opposite worlds, began a dance of silences, glances, and unspoken words that would change the course of their destinies. Neither of them knew yet that this was just the beginning of a story that would challenge all their beliefs about love, trust, and redemption. What they also didn't know was that Claudia Vega observed their interaction with calculating eyes. If there was anything the public relations director hated more than incompetence, it was competition. And in Emily Johnson's eyes, in the way Michael looked at her, she saw a threat that needed to be eliminated before it took root. The weeks passed, and Emily had earned the team's respect with her dedication and creativity. Her fresh approach and unique perspective, coming from her southern roots, brought ideas that pleasantly surprised everyone except Claudia, who watched with growing alarm as Michael found excuses to attend meetings where he previously delegated, how his eyes discreetly followed the young woman, how his usual coldness softened slightly in her presence. "I don't understand what he sees in her," Claudia commented venomously to Jake during a break. She's pretty, yes, but completely ordinary. And that southern accent. Do you really think someone like her could fit into our world? Jake, who had developed genuine respect for Emily's work ethic, shrugged. Maybe that's precisely what Michael values, that she's not like everyone else who constantly tries to impress him. Are you insinuating that I try to impress him? Claudia asked with a threatening tone. I didn't say anything like that, Jake replied diplomatically, walking away with a contained smile. He knew Claudia's personal ambitions regarding Michael all too well, ambitions that the businessman had never encouraged. One afternoon, while Emily was organizing menu samples for the big event in the building's experimental kitchen, Michael entered without prior notice. He was wearing rolled-up sleeves and a slightly loosened tie, signs of a long workday. Miss Johnson, could you try something traditional from your homeland? I've heard wonders about Southern cuisine, he requested with a formality that contrasted with the intimacy of the situation. They were alone in the large kitchen, illuminated by the soft light of dusk filtering through the windows. Emily, surprised but determined to seize the opportunity, nodded enthusiastically. From her bag, she took out a small package of ingredients she had brought that morning, anticipating the possibility of experimenting during her break. I can prepare shrimp and grits with ingredients I brought from my last trip to visit my mother, she offered, her face lighting up with the passion she always felt when talking about cooking. It won't be exactly traditional because we don't have all the elements, but it will capture the essence. Michael watched her fascinated as she moved through the kitchen with natural grace, explaining each ingredient, each technique, with contagious enthusiasm. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen someone so passionate about something, so authentic in their love for what they did. When she finally presented him with the shrimp and grits garnished with fresh herbs and a drizzle of hot sauce she had managed to find at a specialty market, Michael tried it with genuine curiosity. The flavor transported him instantly to his childhood, to the summers he spent at his grandmother's farmhouse when his southern nanny prepared similar dishes, away from his father's strict supervision, to a time when life was simple, before responsibilities, before betrayals. This reminds me of my childhood, he confessed after the first bite, with a vulnerability he never showed. My nanny was from Georgia and prepared something similar in the farmhouse kitchen when my father wasn't around to reprimand her for not following the French menu he preferred. Emily looked at him surprised, not only by the coincidence, but by the unexpected openness. It was the first time Michael had shared something personal with her. Food has that power, Mr. Davis, Emily replied, watching fascinated as the powerful businessman closed his eyes, savoring the memories. It connects us with who we are, with our roots. Sometimes a single bite can transport us to moments we thought we had forgotten. Michael, he corrected in a low voice, opening his eyes to look at her directly. When we're alone, call me Michael. That small act of trust marked the beginning of increasingly frequent encounters. Michael began to pass by the experimental kitchen casually during the afternoons, just when he knew Emily would be working there. Conversations about cooking that turned into chats about dreams, fears, and hopes, always maintaining distances, always with the invisible barrier of boss and employee, but increasingly aware of the undeniable attraction growing between them. My mother always says that the kitchen is the heart of any home, Emily commented one afternoon while preparing different dessert options. And for the event, that you can know a family's soul by what's cooked in their house. My house never had a soul then, Michael replied with a bitter smile. After my mother died, my father forbade any dish that reminded him of her. The chefs only prepared what he approved, always international food, nothing that tasted like home. Emily looked at him with compassion. Sometimes people face pain in strange ways. My father didn't face pain. He buried it, Michael corrected, surprising himself by sharing something so personal as he taught me to do. These moments of vulnerability became increasingly frequent between them, small confessions, fragments of their lives they didn't share with anyone else. A connection that grew silently, nourished by mutual understanding of what it meant to struggle, lose, and move forward. During the final tasting of the anniversary menu, Emily presented an innovative dessert that fused French techniques with American flavors. A chocolate mousse with a center of homemade caramel, decorated with crystallized peach flowers and a thin gold leaf. The dessert, named Meeting of Worlds, perfectly symbolized the fusion between tradition and modernity that characterized Davis Group under Michael's direction. When all the executives left after enthusiastically approving the complete menu, Michael stayed behind, watching Emily meticulously clean her workstation. "Where did you learn to create something like this?" he asked, genuinely impressed, taking a spoonful of the dessert he had specially reserved. "In my dreams," she replied with a shy smile, without stopping her organizing. "I studied 2 years of culinary arts before before I had to pause. But I'm always experimenting at home, reading, learning." "And why didn't you resume?" he insisted, intrigued by this part of her story he didn't fully know yet. Emily lowered her gaze, embarrassed. Her hands paused for a moment on the marble counter. "My mother got seriously ill. The treatments were expensive, and the waiting list at public hospitals was endless. I had to choose between paying for university or her medicines." She looked up, facing Michael's blue eyes with determination. "It wasn't really a choice. Life sometimes forces you to choose between your dreams and your responsibilities." Michael watched her for a long time, recognizing in her a strength similar to what he had needed to overcome his own complicated childhood, something very few knew about the now powerful businessman. The difference was that he had had resources, while Emily had fought against all odds. "Sometimes dreams are just waiting for the right moment," he finally said, accidentally brushing her hand as he took the last spoonful of dessert. The contact, brief but electrifying, left them breathless. Neither dared to move for a few seconds, their eyes connected in silent communication more powerful than any words. The spell was broken when they heard the sound of heels approaching. Michael reluctantly withdrew his hand just as Claudia entered the kitchen with a calculating smile. "Michael, Gabriela Fuentes just arrived. She's eager to see you," she announced with false innocence, assessing the situation with astute eyes. The mention of the beautiful international model, whom tabloids frequently linked with Michael, was like a bucket of cold water for Emily. The reality of their different worlds hit her forcefully. He belonged to a universe of glamour, power, and runway. Beauties. She was simply another employee, a girl from the countryside with dreams bigger than her possibilities. "Tell her I apologize. I have an unavoidable commitment," Michael replied without taking his eyes off Emily, whose face had acquired a carefully neutral expression. "But she came from New York, specifically to see you," Claudia insisted with poorly disguised irritation. "She's been waiting for almost an hour." "I said I have a commitment," Michael replied with a cutting tone, finally, turning to Claudia. "Apologize on my behalf and schedule a meeting for tomorrow if she's still interested in discussing her participation in the campaign." Claudia pressed her lips, clearly upset, but nodded before leaving with rigid steps. Emily continued cleaning, trying to pretend she hadn't heard the conversation, that it didn't affect her. "Emily," Michael called softly, "tomorrow is the lighting test in the main event hall. I'd like you to be present. Your opinion on the atmosphere will be important to properly complement the food service." It was a transparent excuse to spend more time together. Both knew it, but Emily nodded professionally. "Of course, Mr. Davis. I'll be there." "Michael," he corrected again with a slight smile. "Until tomorrow, Emily." When she was alone, Emily allowed herself to release the air she had been holding. What was happening? What was this inexplicable connection with a man who represented everything beyond her reach? Worse still, why couldn't she stop thinking about him, anticipating their encounters, memorizing every detail of their conversations? That night, while Sarah slept, Emily's phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Rooftop of Panorama Hotel. Tomorrow, At 7 p.m., only if you want to. M. With her heart beating frantically, she hesitated for a long time before responding. It was madness, complete insanity that could only end in pain. And yet, I'll be there. E, she finally wrote, knowing she had just crossed an invisible line that would change everything. What no one knew was that Claudia had intercepted the message thanks to a spy program she had installed on Michael's phone, worried about his behavioral changes and growing distraction in recent weeks. Her eyes gleamed with malice as she formulated a plan. She was willing to do anything to protect the privileged position she had built over years beside Michael, the position she was certain would someday make her Mrs. Davis. I won't allow some nobody to destroy years of patient waiting, she murmured to herself, beginning to type names and contacts in her own agenda. It was time to investigate Emily Johnson's past more deeply. Everyone had secrets, and she was determined to find hers. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Emily stared at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep. What would her mother say if she knew what she was feeling for Michael Davis? She would probably warn her that people like them didn't belong to the same universe. That stories like this only ended with broken hearts. "Mom, I think I'm making a mistake," she whispered in the darkness, as if her mother could hear her across the distance. But deep in her heart, Emily knew it was too late to turn back. Something stronger than her was pushing her toward Michael, toward those blue eyes that seemed to see directly into her soul. In his apartment, Michael also couldn't sleep. For the first time in 3 years, he felt that the walls he had built around his heart were beginning to crack, and the most surprising thing was that he didn't want to repair them. The rooftop of the Panorama Hotel offered a spectacular view of Miami, bathed in the colors of dusk. The city lights began to turn on one by one, like earthly stars competing with the sky that slowly darkened. Emily, wearing a simple green dress she had bought that same afternoon with her savings, waited nervously. The color enhanced her eyes and complemented her fair skin, giving her a natural elegance that no designer dress could surpass. She had arrived 20 minutes before the agreed time, unable to contain her anxiety. Every time the rooftop door opened, her heart jumped, only to be disappointed when she saw it wasn't Michael. What if he didn't come? What if all this was a mistake, or worse yet, some kind of cruel game? When Michael finally appeared, dressed in casual clothes for the first time since she had known him, dark jeans and a light blue shirt that enhanced his eyes, Emily felt her heart stop. Without the formal suit, he looked younger, more accessible, although the intensity of his gaze remained the same. "I thought you wouldn't come," he confessed, approaching the secluded table where she waited. "I thought the same about you," she replied with a nervous smile, relieved that her voice sounded normal despite the whirlwind of emotions she felt. For the first time, they talked like two people, not like boss and employee. Michael told her about his passion for architecture, his first love, before being forced to take the reins of the family business after his father's sudden death. He told her how he had personally designed several of the Davis chain hotels, always seeking to integrate traditional American elements with contemporary lines. Emily, in turn, shared her dreams of opening a small restaurant that would fuse traditional recipes from her hometown with contemporary techniques. She spoke of her grandmother, who had taught her the secrets of Southern cooking, and how every time she cooked, she felt her presence guiding her hands. The night advanced, and with each shared word, with each laugh, with each glance, the distance between their worlds seemed to diminish. The waiter came and went discreetly, bringing dishes they barely tasted, too absorbed in each other to pay attention to the food. Michael intentionally brushed Emily's fingers on the table, an apparently casual but meaningful gesture. Unlike the first time, this contact was deliberate. A silent question. "There's something about you," he murmured without withdrawing his hand. "Something that makes me want to break all the rules I've imposed on myself." "What rules?" she asked in a whisper, conscious that they were entering dangerous territory, but unable to stop. "Not getting involved with anyone who works for me. Not mixing personal with professional." he began, his thumb gently caressing the back of Emily's hand. Not trusting again, not loving again. Loving, Emily completed, surprising herself with her own audacity. The word floated between them, loaded with possibilities and dangers. The silence that followed was so dense with tension it could almost be touched. The soft jazz music playing in the background seemed distant, as if they existed in their own bubble, separate from the rest of the world. Finally, Michael spoke. "My fiancée didn't simply leave me at the altar, as the newspapers say. She ran away with my younger brother, Gabriel. They disappeared together after emptying several company accounts, taking almost $50 million. Emily held her breath. The revelation was much more painful than she had imagined. She understood now the armor he had built around his heart, the wall of coldness with which he protected himself from the world. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely, intertwining her fingers with his in a gesture of support. "That kind of double betrayal, I can't imagine how devastating it must have been. The worst wasn't the betrayal," he continued, as if, once the floodgates of his secrets were opened, he couldn't stop them. "The worst was realizing that I never saw the signs because I was too busy building an empire. I trusted blindly in the wrong people, in those who supposedly should have loved me unconditionally." His voice broke slightly as he continued. "My brother was 5 years younger. I practically raised him after our mother's death. And Carolina, my fiancée, we had been together since college. I believed she knew me better than anyone." His voice broke slightly when pronouncing her name, and Emily felt a stab of pain for him. How could someone betray a man like Michael like that? "Sometimes we trust not because others deserve it, but because we need to believe that love is possible," Emily replied, thinking of her own father, who had abandoned them when she was a child, leaving them in poverty. "My father left us when I was 8 years old. One day he simply didn't come back from work. Later we found out he had run away with another woman, taking our savings. My mother fell into such a deep depression that she became physically ill." Michael gently squeezed her hand, encouraging her to continue. "For a long time I wondered what we had done wrong, why we weren't enough for him," Emily confessed. "Now I understand that some people simply aren't made to truly love, to commit. The problem was never us. It was him." "And you, Emily?" Michael asked, looking at her intensely. "What other scars do you hide behind those eyes that seem to see everything?" She hesitated for a moment. She never talked about her past, about the humiliations, the hunger, the rejection. "After my father abandoned us, we had to move to a neighborhood on the outskirts of town. I was the con man's daughter. Nobody wanted to befriend me at school. My mother got sick from sadness, literally, a heart problem that worsened until it left her semi-invalid. I spent my life trying to compensate for his absence, trying to be enough to prove that I'm worth something." "You are more than enough," Michael murmured, bringing his face closer to hers. "You are extraordinary, Emily. Your strength, your determination, your ability to see beauty where others would only see shortcomings. That's what fascinates me about you from the first moment." Their lips were about to meet when Emily's phone rang insistently. For a second, she considered ignoring it, but something told her she should answer. It was Sarah, hysterical. "Em, your mother is in the hospital, a heart attack. The neighbor just called. You need to come right now. They're asking for authorization for emergency surgery." Emily's world collapsed in an instant. Her mother, her anchor, the reason she fought every day. She couldn't lose her, she simply couldn't. "I'm coming," she replied with a trembling voice, hanging up to frantically search for her bag. Michael, seeing her pallor and the tremor in her hands, didn't need explanations. "Your mother," he guessed, standing immediately. "What happened?" "Heart attack," Emily managed to articulate. "She's in Alabama. I need to get there, but I don't know how. The last bus already left and my car's in the shop." "My private jet can be ready in 30 minutes, Michael interrupted, with calm determination. "Let's go." At that moment, Emily didn't have the strength to protest or be surprised. She simply nodded, allowing Michael to guide her out of the restaurant with a protective arm around her shoulders. During the trip to the private airport, Michael made several calls, organizing everything with efficiency born from years of managing business crises. By the time they reached the runway where the elegant jet with the Davis emblem awaited them, Michael had already contacted the best heart specialists in Atlanta, organized an immediate transfer of Emily's mother to a private clinic as soon as she was stabilized, and sent an advanced medical team to the small, rural hospital where she was located. Emily, consumed by worry, barely registered what was happening around her. Only when they were in the air, with Miami transforming into a carpet of lights beneath them, did she truly become aware of what Michael was doing for her. "You didn't need to do all this," she murmured, tears finally overflowing down her cheeks. "I can't pay you back." "I'm not asking you to pay me back anything," he replied firmly, sitting beside her and taking her hands in his. "I'm here because I care about you, Emily, because I care about what matters to you." The sincerity in his voice broke down Emily's last defenses, who allowed herself for the first time in years to lean on someone else. She cried silently on Michael's shoulder while he held her, offering comfort without superfluous words. When they arrived at the small rural hospital where they had admitted Mrs. Patricia Johnson, Emily's mother had already been stabilized thanks to the medical team sent by Michael. The woman with a kind face and green eyes identical to her daughter's rested connected to monitors that showed now normalized vital signs. Seeing her daughter enter with an unknown man who gave orders as if he owned the place, Mrs. Patricia smiled weakly. "So I'll finally meet the man who makes you sigh in your dreams," the woman joked, causing a violent blush in Emily. "Mom, he's my boss," Emily explained awkwardly, conscious that the word was ridiculously insufficient to describe what Michael was beginning to mean to her. "Michael Davis, Ma'am. A pleasure to meet you," he said with a respect that surprised Emily. There was no condescension in his treatment, only genuine consideration. He approached the bed and took the woman's hand gently. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but I promise you'll receive the best possible care." "A pleasure, Mr. Davis," Mrs. Patricia replied, evaluating him with the wisdom of someone who had lived enough to see beyond appearances. "My daughter didn't mention that her boss was so handsome or so attentive." "Mom!" Emily protested, mortified, but secretly relieved to see her mother recovered enough to joke. While the doctors explained the transfer procedure that would be performed as soon as Mrs. Patricia was completely stable, Emily watched incredulously as Michael transformed before her eyes. There was no trace of the cold and calculating man everyone feared at the company. In his place, she saw someone compassionate, determined to help without flaunting his power or wealth. "The doctor says your mother will need surgery," Michael explained in a low voice when they were alone in the corridor. "I've arranged everything for it to be performed by Dr. Hernandez in Atlanta. He's the best specialist in the country." "Michael, I don't know how to thank you for all this," Emily began, overwhelmed by his generosity. "You don't need to thank me," he interrupted softly. "I just want you to know that you're not alone in this, Emily. You don't need to carry everything on your shoulders." For the first time in her adult life, Emily felt that someone was truly by her side, not just with words, but with concrete actions. It was a feeling as overwhelming as it was comforting. What no one knew was that in Miami, Claudia had discovered their whereabouts and was furious. Her original plan to sabotage the rooftop encounter had failed, and now Michael was in Alabama mobilizing significant company resources to help Emily's mother. "This goes beyond simple attraction," she murmured to herself while reviewing the reports she had received. "I need something more forceful to separate them." With renewed determination, she began searching through files from Emily's hometown, in old records, anywhere she could find a stain in the young chef's past. Her expression transformed into a malicious smile when she finally found something. "Robert Martinez," she read aloud, savoring the name like an anticipated victory. "Interesting, very interesting." While Claudia plotted her plan, Emily and Michael spent hours at the hospital, alternating between consultations with doctors and quiet moments beside Mrs. Patricia's bed. It was during one of these vigils that Michael noticed the small, improvised altar Emily had created in the corner of the room, with a candle, wildflowers, and an image of the Virgin Mary. "Are you religious?" he asked, with genuine curiosity. Emily smiled softly. "Not exactly. It's more a connection with my roots, with my hometown's traditions. My grandmother taught me that faith isn't about dogmas, but about finding light in dark moments." Michael contemplatively observed the small altar. "It's been a long time since I felt that kind of connection with anything," he confessed. "Sometimes I wonder if I forgot how to believe in something greater than quarterly reports and financial projections." "It's never too late to remember," Emily replied, taking his hand. In an instinctive gesture that seemed the most natural thing in the world. At that moment, while sharing a complicit silence in the hospital room, something subtly changed between them. They weren't just getting to know each other, they were recognizing each other, as if their souls had been searching for each other through time and space. Mrs. Patricia's transfer to the private clinic in Atlanta was just the beginning. During the following weeks, while the woman recovered under the best medical care, Emily and Michael developed a routine that brought them closer every day. He divided his time between business obligations he attended remotely and visits to the clinic, where he surprisingly engaged in long conversations with Emily's mother. To the nurse's amazement, the powerful businessman frequently brought personally coffee and traditional cornbread he bought at the neighborhood bakery, striving to find flavors that reminded Mrs. Patricia of her hometown. Emily alternated between maternal care and long-distance coordination of the approaching big anniversary event. Despite the situation, Michael had insisted she maintain her position and responsibilities, convinced that her talent was irreplaceable. Thanks to video calls and efficient assistance, she managed to supervise progress without neglecting her mother. "I've never seen my daughter so happy," Mrs. Patricia commented to Michael one afternoon when Emily had gone to get coffee at the hospital cafeteria. The woman had recovered remarkably well after surgery, regaining color and energy day by day. "She has light in her eyes, the same she lost when her father left us." "She's an extraordinary woman," he replied sincerely, arranging the fresh flowers he had brought that morning. "She deserves all the happiness in the world." "And will you be the one to give it to her?" the woman asked directly, with the frankness of someone who had seen too much in life to beat around the bush. Michael remained silent. For a moment, conscious of the question's importance. It wasn't a casual conversation. It was Emily's mother evaluating him, determining his intentions. "I'd like to try if she'll let me," he finally replied, sustaining Mrs. Patricia's penetrating gaze, similar to her daughter's. "But I'm afraid I'm not what she needs, that my own scars will prevent me from making her happy." "Love isn't the absence of scars, young man." The woman smiled with the wisdom that only years and overcome suffering. "A grant. It's finding someone whose scars complement yours, someone who understands your pain because they felt something similar. I only ask one thing of you. Don't play with her. She's suffered too many abandonments." "I'm not a man of games, Mrs. Patricia," he replied seriously, taking the woman's wrinkled hand in his. "When I commit, it's forever. My problem has been rather the opposite, fearing to commit again after what happened." "Fear is a bad counselor, Michael," she said, using his name for the first time. "Don't let it steal your opportunity to be happy. Believe me, I speak from experience." The conversation was interrupted when Emily returned with the drinks, but Mrs. Patricia's words kept echoing in Michael's mind. That night, while returning to the hotel suite where he was staying during his time in Atlanta, he made a decision. It was time to let the past be just that, the past. What no one knew was that Claudia had been busy. After weeks of meticulous investigation, she had discovered the true identity of Emily's father, Robert Martinez, an accountant who years ago had participated in a millionaire fraud against several important companies. Among them, Davis Corporation, when Michael's father still directed the family empire. The scandal had been huge at the time. Robert Martinez, along with two partners, had diverted funds for more than $100 million before disappearing. Eventually, he was captured and sent to prison, where he still remained serving a 15-year sentence. The daughter of the man who almost ruined the Davis family, now conquering the heir, Claudia murmured with perverse satisfaction while reviewing the documents. How poetic, and how devastating it will be when Michael finds out. The night before returning to Miami for the big event, Michael took Emily to dinner at a small restaurant with a terrace overlooking the illuminated cathedral. They had spent almost 3 weeks since Mrs. Patricia's heart attack, and the doctors had finally authorized her to return home, confirming that her recovery was going better than expected. The restaurant was simple but charming, with an intimate and authentic atmosphere that perfectly reflected Atlanta's spirit. Michael had specifically chosen a place that wasn't ostentatious, conscious that Emily felt more comfortable in spaces with soul than in luxurious but impersonal establishments. "I've been thinking," he said while they shared a peach cobbler dessert, "that maybe it's time for you to resume your culinary studies." Emily looked at him surprised, leaving her spoon suspended halfway. "How? My mother will need care and—" "I've been thinking," he said while they shared a peach cobbler dessert, "that maybe it's time for you to resume your culinary studies." Emily looked at him surprised, leaving her spoon suspended halfway. "How? My mother will need care, and although I'm infinitely grateful for everything you've done, it's not charity." "It's not charity, Emily," he interrupted gently, his blue eyes shining with an intensity that took her breath away. "It's an investment. I'm planning to open a chain of restaurants with a contemporary Southern concept, and I'll need an executive chef who truly understands the roots of that cuisine. Someone who can create dishes that tell stories, that connect with people on an emotional level, not just gastronomic." The proposal floated between them like a promise, a bridge extended between their seemingly incompatible worlds. Emily felt a whirlwind of contradictory emotions, gratitude, hope, but also a stab of wounded pride. Was this compassion disguised as professional opportunity? "Your mother can move to Miami," Michael continued, reading the doubt in her eyes. "I have an empty apartment near yours that could be perfectly adapted for her. And the study program could be adjusted so you can care for her properly." Their eyes met in the soft candlelight, the illuminated cathedral forming an almost cinematic backdrop for this moment that both felt was decisive. Both knew they were talking about much more than a professional project or resumed studies. "Why me?" she asked in a whisper, needing to understand if this was real or simply the passing whim of a powerful man. Michael extended his hand across the table, taking hers gently. "Because you're authentic. Because you have fire in your hands and soul," he replied, his voice deeper, more intimate. "Because when I taste your food, I feel I can know your heart. Because you see beauty where others only see shortcomings. Because you make me want to be better, Emily." The moment was perfect for their first real kiss, but Emily felt a growing uneasiness, a weight in her chest she couldn't ignore. If they were going to move forward in this direction, if she was really going to allow herself to feel everything she was feeling for him, she needed to be completely honest. "Michael, there are things about my past you don't know, things that could change what you feel," she began, gently withdrawing her hand and lowering her gaze to the half-eaten dessert. "Nothing could do that," he assured with such conviction she almost believed him. "Don't be so sure," she replied sadly. "We all have secrets, and some way more than others." Michael leaned forward, shortening the distance between them. His hand rose to gently caress Emily's cheek. "Then share them with me. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Before Emily could respond, before she could find courage to reveal the truth about her father, Michael slowly approached until his lips brushed hers in a tentative kiss that quickly transformed into something deep and revealing, a kiss that spoke of second chances, of wounds beginning to heal, of a future they might, just might, be able to build together. When they separated, Emily had tears in her eyes. For the first time in her adult life, she allowed herself to dream of true love, of a future where she wouldn't be alone, fighting against the world. And precisely because what they were building was too precious, still too fragile, she didn't find courage to speak about Robert Martinez, the man whose actions had marked both families in ways neither could fully imagine. "We should go back," she murmured, trying to regain composure. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Michael nodded, respecting her need for space. He paid the bill and accompanied her to the hotel where they were staying on different floors, but under the same roof, like a metaphor for their lives, close but still separated by invisible barriers. Back in Miami, reality awaited them like a forming storm. The day of the anniversary event had arrived, and the entire team worked frantically on the final details. Emily's absence during the previous weeks, though justified, had generated all kinds of speculation, especially because Michael had been equally absent, delegating responsibilities he normally attended personally. The historic mansion, chosen for the event, sparkled under strategically placed lights. The garden had been transformed into a magical setting that combined traditional American elements with touches of modernity, perfectly reflecting the philosophy of Davis Group under Michael's leadership. Emily supervised the final details of the catering, ensuring each dish was a culinary work of art. The menu she had designed was a gastronomic journey through America, culminating with the meeting of world's dessert that had so impressed Michael weeks ago. "You look beautiful," said a familiar voice behind her. Turning around, Emily found Jake, who observed her with a friendly smile. During the weeks in Atlanta, they had developed a cordial relationship through work video calls, and she had discovered that beneath his appearance as an efficient assistant hid a kind and perceptive man. "Thank you," she replied timidly. The wine-colored dress she wore had been a surprise gift from Michael, delivered that morning to her. Apartment with a simple note, "So everyone can see what I see when I look at you." It was elegant but not ostentatious, perfectly adequate for her position at the event. "Michael will officially announce the new restaurant project tonight," Jake commented casually, though his attentive eyes studied her reaction. "He's very excited. I haven't seen him like this since, well, for a long time." Emily felt a knot in her stomach. Michael hadn't mentioned he would make the project public so soon. "Really?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Jake nodded. "He also plans to introduce you as the future executive chef," he added, confirming what she suspected. "It's a big step for both of you, don't you think?" Before she could respond, Claudia appeared with her usual intimidating elegance and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jake, they need you at the entrance. It seems there's a problem with the guest list." Once Jake left, Claudia turned to Emily with a falsely cordial smile that froze the young chef's blood. There was something predatory in the way she looked at her, like a feline about to pounce on its prey. "I wanted to congratulate you personally," she said with a honeyed voice. "Not just anyone manages to enchant Michael Davis like that. I must admit your strategy was brilliant. The poor waitress with chef dreams, the sick mother, all that touching story." She made a dramatic pause. "Almost as touching as your father's story." "I don't know what you're talking about," Emily replied tensely, busy with the final menu adjustments, trying to stay calm, although her heart had started beating uncontrollably. "Oh, come on. The daughter of a con man who manages to get into the boss's bed is almost poetic," Claudia continued venomously. "Or does Michael already know that your father not only abandoned your mother, but is in prison for fraud? Does he know that the surname Johnson is false, that your real surname is Martinez, the same as that famous accountant who fled, with millions from various important businessmen, including Michael's father?" Emily paled. It was true. Her father had been an accomplice in a fraud that affected many powerful families, including the Davis family. They had changed surnames and moved to a remote town to avoid public shame, to try to build a new life away from the scandal. How? she stammered, unable to complete the question, though the answer was obvious. Claudia had investigated thoroughly, determined to find something she could use against her. "I have my resources," the woman replied with satisfaction. "What intrigues me is whether you really didn't know your father helped ruin the Davis family, or if all this has been an elaborate revenge. Seducing the son of the man who sent your father to prison would be a masterful revenge plan, wouldn't it?" "No!" Emily protested, horrified by the suggestion. "I didn't even know Michael was connected to that case. My mother never spoke about the details. I only knew my father had committed fraud and was in prison." "I see you haven't told him," Claudia smiled triumphantly. "How convenient. Just when he's about to announce this restaurant project with you as the protagonist, when he's finally opening his heart again, he'll discover he's been trusting the daughter of the man who betrayed his family." "How do you know about the project?" Emily asked, feeling the ground move under her feet. "I have my methods, and I also have the evidence ready to show Michael." "Right after his speech," she threatened. "Unless you disappear right now, quit, go far away, and I'll keep your dirty secret." "I can't do that," Emily exclaimed desperately. "The event, all the work." "What do you think hurts more, Emily?" Claudia asked with false compassion. "That you disappear without explanation, or that he discovers the woman he was beginning to trust is part of the family that almost destroyed his? Think carefully. If you really care about him, you'll spare him that." Pain. Devastated, Emily saw her newly built world crumble. She couldn't let Michael discover the truth this way, through Claudia and her malicious insinuations. But she also couldn't flee without explanation, not after everything they had shared. With trembling hands, she wrote a letter confessing everything. Who her father really was, how she had grown up ashamed of her surname, how her mother had tried to protect her by changing their identities, how she had never connected her father's case with the Davis family until that moment. She explained that she had planned to tell him that night in Atlanta, but hadn't found the courage. Torn between fear of losing him and the need to be honest, she left the letter in the private office Michael maintained at the mansion, where she knew he would find it after the event. Then, with a broken heart but a slightly clearer conscience, she headed to the airport to take the first available flight. Her destination, return to Alabama, to her small town where at least she had true roots, where her mother waited unaware of this new crisis. Meanwhile, Michael, oblivious to everything, prepared for his speech. Dressed in an impeccable black suit that enhanced the intense blue of his eyes, he mentally reviewed the words he had prepared. This night he wouldn't just celebrate the family company's anniversary, he would also announce a new chapter in his personal and professional life, one in which Emily Johnson would play a fundamental role. As guests arrived, politicians, businessmen, celebrities, all eager to be seen at the social event of the year, Michael searched for Emily with his gaze. There was something important he wanted to tell her before taking the stage, something he had decided on the flight back to Miami. "Have you seen Emily?" he asked Jake, who was supervising the VIP guests' arrival. "I saw her about 20 minutes ago in the kitchen area," his assistant replied. "She seemed somewhat altered after talking with—" "Claudia?" Michael frowned. "Claudia? What did she want?" "I don't know, but it didn't seem like a friendly conversation," Jake commented with concern. "Do you want me to look for her?" "No, I'll handle it," Michael replied, heading to the kitchen with determined steps. But Emily was no longer there or anywhere else at the event. It was as if she had vanished. With growing uneasiness, Michael looked for Claudia, finally finding her by the bar, chatting animatedly with an important politician. "Where's Emily?" he asked without preamble, interrupting the conversation. Claudia looked at him with feigned surprise. "Didn't she tell you? She mentioned she had an urgent matter to attend to, something related to her mother, I believe." The explanation sounded plausible, given Mrs. Patricia's recent illness, but something in Claudia's tone, in the poorly disguised satisfaction in her eyes, set off all of Michael's alarms. "What did you say to her?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Just had a little woman-to-woman chat, Claudia replied with false innocence. Maybe you should ask her about her ancestry, about who she really is. Before Michael could respond, Jake appeared to inform him it was time for his speech. The guests were waiting. The media were ready to broadcast his words live. He couldn't delay it. With a last warning look at Claudia, Michael headed to the improvised stage in the gardens. As he climbed the steps, he noticed his phone vibrating with a message. It was from Emily. I'm sorry I can't stay. In my letter, you'll understand why. Goodbye, Michael. The message left him cold. Letter? What letter? And why did it sound like a definitive farewell? Despite the confusion and growing anguish, Michael maintained his composure. Years of business under pressure had taught him to separate personal from professional, at least superficially. With a perfectly rehearsed smile, he welcomed the guests and began a speech he had memorized, but which now sounded hollow to his own ears. He spoke of his father's legacy, of how Davis Group had grown under his direction, of new projects for the future, but he omitted all mention of southern restaurants and, of course, Emily. Something told him that shared dream had just vanished before being publicly announced. When he finally finished the official part of the event, he discreetly excused himself and headed to his private office. He needed to find that letter, understand what had happened for Emily to flee. Like that, without face-to-face explanations. The letter was on his desk, a simple envelope with his name written in the delicate and slightly slanted handwriting he had learned to recognize in menu notes and gastronomic proposals. Each word was like a dagger, the confession about her father's true identity, the shame, the fear of his reaction, but above all, her decision to disappear so as not to cause him more pain. Emily explained how she had never connected her father's case with the Davis family until that very night, how she had grown up trying to compensate for the mistakes of a man she barely remembered, how she had wanted to tell him in Atlanta, but fear had paralyzed her. "Why didn't you trust me?" Michael murmured, crumpling the paper in his hands. Initial anger quickly gave way to iron determination. He wouldn't let the past steal their opportunity for a future together. Not when he had finally found someone who made his heart beat again. When leaving the office, he found Claudia, who was waiting for him with a satisfied smile. "Michael, there's something important you should know about that girl," she began with false concern. "I have documents that prove her father was part of the fraud that almost ruined your family, that her real surname is Martinez, not Johnson." "You mean she's the daughter of Robert Martinez? That her father was an accomplice of the accountant who swindled my family and others when I was barely 12 years old?" he replied coldly. "I already know everything." Claudia's smile froze. "Then you'll understand that someone like that can't be part of your life or your company. Who knows if all this wasn't an elaborate revenge, infiltrating, gaining your trust, and then—" "The only thing I understand," Michael said, approaching threateningly, his voice like ice, "is that you manipulated confidential information, harassed an employee, and tried to sabotage a business project for personal reasons." He looked at her with a mixture of contempt and disappointment that made Claudia instinctively back away. "Pack your things, Claudia. You're fired." "You can't be serious," she exclaimed, panic replacing her usual confidence. "I've dedicated 8 years of my life to this company, to you. Everything I did was to protect you." "Everything you did was for your own interests," he corrected harshly. "And there's no place for that in my life or my company. You have until tomorrow to clear out your office. If you try anything against Emily or leak any confidential information, you'll face a lawsuit that will make you wish you'd never met me." Without waiting for a response, he headed to his car. He had a pretty clear idea of where to find Emily. The small town of Fairhope received the first rays of dawn when Michael's luxurious vehicle stopped in front of the modest brick house where Emily had grown up. The contrast was dramatic. The urban elegance of the black SUV against the rural surroundings of simple houses, cobblestone, streets, and majestic mountains on the horizon. Mrs. Patricia, who had returned home 2 days earlier thanks to a private transfer organized by Michael, was the first to see him. She smiled to herself without any surprise. Somehow she had expected this visit, since Emily arrived in the middle of the night with swollen eyes from crying and a fragmented story about family secrets and broken hearts. Emily was sitting on the small porch, wrapped in a shawl woven by her grandmother, her gaze lost in the mist-covered mountains of morning. The steaming coffee in her hands remained untouched, testimony to her distraction. She hadn't slept all night, tormented by guilt, regret, and the certainty of having lost something precious before even fully possessing it. The sound of the engine pulled her from her thoughts. Looking up, her heart skipped when she recognized the vehicle. Then, when Michael got out with his imposing presence now framed by the simple surroundings of the town, she felt time stop. He wore jeans and a casual shirt so different from the elegant suits she was used to seeing him in. His face showed signs of fatigue, probably from the long night journey from Miami, but his blue eyes maintained the same intensity that had captivated her from the first day. "How did you find me?" she asked with a trembling voice when he approached the porch. "Your mother," he replied simply. "I sent a message last night after reading your letter. I was worried about you." Emily shot an accusatory look toward the interior of the house, where her mother was certainly pretending not to spy from behind the window curtain. "I should have imagined you two already had some kind of secret communication," she commented with a shadow of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I read your letter," he stated, noticing the crumpled paper he held in his hand. "Every word," Michael confirmed, climbing the 2 steps that separated him from the porch. Now they were face to face, just a meter apart. Emily closed her eyes, expecting the reprimand, the accusation, even contempt. Instead, she felt Michael's hands taking hers, warm and firm. "My father also made mistakes, Emily," he began with a soft but sure voice. "Shady business, questionable decisions, manipulations that affected many families. The difference is, he had money to hide it, and your father didn't." His voice was calm, without a trace of the anger or disappointment she had feared. "And about the fraud your father participated in, do you know why the media never mention it when they talk about the Davis family history?" Emily shook her head, confused. "Because my father deliberately inflated the numbers to collect insurance," Michael confessed bitterly. "The fraud existed, yes, but my father used it for his own benefit, exaggerating the losses. Your father went to prison, but mine should have accompanied him for insurance fraud." The revelation left Emily speechless. All this time she had carried the shame of being a criminal's daughter, only to discover that the line between victims and perpetrators was much more blurred than she had imagined. "We are not our parents, Emily," Michael continued, approaching 1 step closer, almost completely eliminating the distance between them. "We don't carry their guilt. We're not condemned to repeat their mistakes. That's the lesson we both must learn." "But I lied to you," she sobbed, tears finally overflowing. "I hid who I really was." "You showed me exactly who you are," he corrected, gently lifting her chin so she would look at him directly. "A brave woman, hard-working, loyal, someone who fought against all odds to build something good from pain, someone who cares for her mother with devotion, who worries more about others than herself, someone who cooks with her soul and loves with all her heart, even though she tries to hide it." His voice softened even more. "That's what I love about you, Emily. Not your surname, whether Johnson or Martinez. You exactly as you are." The word love floated between them like a revelation, an unexpected miracle in the midst of so much confusion and pain. "You love me?" she asked, incredulous, fearing she had heard wrong, that she had projected her own feelings onto his words. "With every part of me I believed was dead," Michael confessed, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. His hands framed Emily's face with infinite tenderness. "And if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life improving it, Not because I need to, but because I want you to know every day how extraordinary you are to me." They kissed under the rising sun, while the town church bells rang in the distance, as if celebrating a new beginning. A kiss that tasted of promises, second chances, wounds beginning to heal. From the window, Mrs. Patricia watched the scene with tears of happiness. After so much suffering, her daughter was finally finding the happiness she deserved, with a man who truly saw her, who valued her strength and kindness above all else. "Stay with me today," Emily asked when they separated. "I want to show you my town, the mountains where I played as a child, the markets that inspired my love for cooking." "I'll stay as long as you want," Michael replied, intertwining his fingers with hers. "The world can wait." And so, for the next 3 days, Emily showed him her universe, the trails through peach orchards where she had learned to distinguish aromas, the small school where a visionary teacher had fostered her dreams of studying culinary arts, the vibrant market where every color, every texture, every flavor told a story. Michael absorbed everything with genuine interest, connecting pieces of the puzzle that was Emily, finally understanding where that silent strength came from, that ability to find beauty in the simple, that talent for transforming basic ingredients into memorable experiences. In the evenings, sitting on the porch under a sky studded with stars, they talked for hours without secrets, without barriers, slowly building the foundations of something both intuited would be forever. "I have a different proposal," Michael said on his last night in town. "I still want the Southern restaurant chain, but with a different approach. I don't want it to be just another Davis Group business. I want it to be yours, Emily, your vision, your concept." "Mine?" she asked, surprised. "How could I—" "I'll be the main investor, of course," he continued, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "But you'll be the majority owner. It's your knowledge, your talent, your cultural heritage that will make this project special. I'll just provide the capital and contacts." Emily looked at him with amazement. It wasn't charity or condescension she saw in his eyes, but genuine respect, confidence in her abilities. "And my mother?" she asked, always practical even in the midst of emotion. "She can stay in Alabama if she prefers the town's tranquility, or move to Miami if she wants to be close to you," Michael replied. "In either case, she'll have the best medical care and all the support she needs." "It sounds too good to be true," Emily murmured, part of her still afraid that everything was a dream she would soon wake from. "It won't be perfect," Michael corrected with a realistic smile. "There will be obstacles, difficult moments, complicated decisions, but we'll face them together if you want." 6 months later, the restaurant Roots opened its doors in Miami's historic district. The carefully restored colonial building preserved its original essence, but incorporated contemporary elements, creating a space that seemed suspended between past and future, just like the cuisine Emily had developed. With Emily as executive chef and majority owner, and Michael as investor partner, the place quickly became a gastronomic phenomenon that fused the best of traditional Southern cooking with contemporary techniques. The reviews were unanimously positive, with special emphasis on the emotional authenticity of each dish, on how every bite told a story of roots, tradition, and evolution. At the official opening, Mrs. Patricia, completely recovered thanks to innovative surgery and rigorous medical follow-up, cut the ribbon, surrounded by young cooks from Emily's hometown, now scholarship recipients to study culinary arts at the school the Davis Foundation had opened in Alabama. "Never forget where you come from," Michael had told Emily when they were planning the project. "Your roots are your strength, not your weakness." That night, after the last customer left, Michael took Emily to the restaurant's rooftop, decorated with soft lights and flowers, typical of the South. Under a starry sky, he knelt before her with a small velvet box in his hand. "A year ago, I accidentally entered a restaurant and found much more than an excellent chef," he said with an emotional voice. "I found the love I no longer believed possible, the courage I had forgotten, and a future I want to build together." He opened the box, revealing a ring with an emerald surrounded by small diamonds the same shade as Emily's eyes. "In these months together, we've faced the past, healed wounds we believed eternal, and built something beautiful. But this is just the beginning." Emily looked at him with contained tears, her heart beating so hard she could almost hear it. "Emily Johnson Martinez," he continued, using both surnames as a way to honor her. "Entire history. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of sharing with me not just this project, but all projects, all dreams, all the days we have left to live?" "Yes," she replied through tears of happiness, her voice barely a whisper. "1,000 times yes, Michael." They kissed under the stars, sealing a promise that had begun with a broken plate and an extended hand in the middle of humiliation a year before. Neither would have imagined that this chance encounter would change their lives forever, that the scars they both carried wouldn't be an obstacle, but the bridge that would connect them at a level few managed to reach. The news of the engagement between Michael Davis, one of America's most powerful businessmen, and Emily Johnson, the chef revelation of the moment, caused a sensation in social and media circles. The tabloids speculated about the love story, inventing torrid romances and clandestine encounters that had little to do with reality. "Let them talk," Emily would say, when Michael got annoyed by the published falsehoods. "What matters is what we know." The wedding, celebrated 6 months later in the gardens of the farm Michael had bought on the outskirts of Fairhope, was an intimate event, despite high society's expectations. Only close family and true friends were invited. Sarah, now image director of Davis Group, cried emotionally beside Jake, with whom she had begun an unexpected romance during the restaurant preparations. At Emily's request, the food was prepared by students from the Foundation's culinary school, supervised by local chefs. Each dish told a story. Each flavor was a tribute to the roots they had both learned to value. Mrs. Patricia, radiant in her matron of honor dress, walked arm in arm with Michael toward the improvised altar under a huge century-old oak tree. In a symbolic gesture that moved all present, she would be the one to give away her future son-in-law, marking the beginning of a new family built, not by blood, but by choice. "Thank you for making my daughter happy," she whispered in his ear before leaving him at the altar. "And thank you for giving me back faith that good men really exist." Michael, visibly moved, gently squeezed her hand before taking his place, waiting with an overflowing heart for the woman who had melted the ice that had surrounded his heart for so long. When Emily appeared at the end of the flower path, a collective sigh ran through those present. Her dress, designed by a talented local artisan, combined traditional white with colorful embroidery typical of the South. In her hands, she carried a bouquet of wildflowers, the flower that, according to American tradition, guides souls on their path. Michael watched her advance, as if contemplating a miracle. In a way, it was. Both had been so broken, so distrustful of love, that finding and recognizing each other among millions of people seemed the work of destiny or some higher force that had decided they deserved a second chance. As Emily advanced toward Michael, she remembered all the nights of loneliness, all the tears shed, all the times she thought she wasn't worth enough, that she didn't deserve to be loved. And she knew, with a certainty that emanated from the deepest part of her being, that every test had been necessary to prepare her for this moment, for this love. Upon reaching Michael, their gazes met with the intensity that had always existed between them, that inexplicable connection that transcended words and circumstances. "I love you," he murmured when he had her before him, words only for her ears. "I love you," she replied, finally sure she deserved all the happiness in the world. And while the pastor began the ceremony, Emily finally understood that the greatest act of courage hadn't been surviving adversity, but allowing herself to be loved without reservations, with all her history, with all her scars. Because true love doesn't erase the past, but integrates it into a larger and more beautiful story, a story that, like good cooking, requires bitter and sweet ingredients to create something extraordinary. The celebration extended until dawn, with traditional Southern music mixed with contemporary rhythms, with laughter, dancing, and meaningful conversations. It wasn't just the union of two people, but of two worlds, of two stories that had found in their differences not an obstacle, but richness. 1 year later, Roots had expanded its concept to 3 more cities: New York, Chicago, and Atlanta. Each restaurant maintained the original essence, but incorporated local elements, creating unique spaces that honored American cultural diversity. The scholarship program for young cooks from rural communities had become a model of social responsibility that other companies were beginning to imitate. Emily personally supervised the selection, ensuring that talent and passion, not economic resources, were the main criteria. 1. Afternoon, while reviewing menus for the Christmas season in the office she shared with Michael at the original restaurant, Emily felt a slight nausea. It wasn't the first time in recent weeks, but she had been too busy to pay attention. "You should see a doctor," Michael suggested, worried upon noticing her pallor. "You've been working too much." "I'm fine," she insisted, although something inside told her this fatigue wasn't normal, that there was something more. "But maybe you're right. I'll call tomorrow to make an appointment." The news came a week later. At the least expected but most perfect moment, they were expecting a baby. A small miracle was growing inside Emily, the physical culmination of the love that had transformed their lives. "A girl," Mrs. Patricia predicted when they told her, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "It will be a girl with green eyes like her mother and the strong character of her father. Or a boy with your culinary skills," Michael joked, hugging Emily from behind, his hands resting protectively on her belly. "Whatever it is, we know this baby will be born surrounded by love, values, the strength that only those who have known pain can transmit. A new generation that would grow up knowing their roots and valuing where they came from, but with the freedom to choose their own path." 6 months later, during a routine ultrasound, they discovered Mrs. Patricia had been right. They were expecting a girl. They decided to name her Patricia Hope, in honor of the grandmother whose strength had inspired Emily, and the hope that had never abandoned either of them, even in their darkest moments. The little girl's birth coincided with Ruth's 2nd anniversary, a new life marking a new chapter in their story, a reminder that the strongest roots aren't those that tie us to the past, but those that nourish us to grow toward the future. The night before delivery, while contemplating the stars from their home's terrace, a beautiful property on Miami's outskirts that combined the architectural elegance Michael so loved with the homey warmth Emily had always dreamed of, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her there. From poor girl in a remote town to internationally recognized chef, from a shamed daughter of a conman to woman proud of her complete history, from young woman afraid of not being enough to woman secure in her worth and power. And the catalyst of all that transformation had been, paradoxically, an accident, a broken plate, public humiliation that had attracted the attention of a man who, like her, carried invisible wounds. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, joining her on the terrace, embracing her from behind, carefully, due to her advanced pregnancy. "About how one moment can change everything," she replied, leaning against his chest. "About how sometimes the worst situations lead us to the best places. We are more than our circumstances," he murmured, gently kissing her hair. "More than our mistakes, more than our fears. That's the most important lesson we can teach our daughter." The next morning, Patricia Hope Davis was born with a powerful cry that announced her presence. She indeed had her mother's green eyes, and as the nurses predicted with laughter, her father's concentrated frown, so characteristic of him. Michael, holding his daughter for the first time, felt his heart, which he once believed frozen forever, expand to unsuspected limits. It was a love different from any other he had experienced, a love that asked nothing in return, that simply existed, complete and perfect from the first instant. "She's perfect," he whispered with a lump in his throat and unshed tears shining in his blue eyes. "Like you," Emily replied with a tired but radiant smile. "We're not perfect. We're imperfectly perfect together, and that's much better." 5 years later, little Patricia ran through the corridors of Roots, now converted into a gastronomic empire with presence in 6 Latin American countries. With her flowered dress and dark hair tied in 2 braids adorned with colorful ribbons, she was joy personified. "Daddy, Mommy said the new dessert is ready and for you to come taste it," she announced with the solemnity of someone carrying a vitally important message. Michael, in the middle of a video conference with international investors, smiled apologetically. "We'll continue this afternoon, gentlemen. I have an unavoidable appointment with the executive chef." The men on screen laughed understandingly. Michael and Emily's partnership, their love story that had inspired a culinary empire based on values of authenticity and social responsibility, was known in the business world as an example to follow. In the experimental kitchen, Emily put finishing touches on an innovative dessert that combined American chocolate with molecular confectionery techniques. Around her, a team of young chefs watched with admiration the woman who had revolutionized contemporary American gastronomy without ever losing humility and connection to her roots. "What do you think?" she asked Michael when he tasted the creation. The flavor transported him instantly to that first shrimp and grits she had prepared for him years ago, to that first genuine connection they had shared. "Extraordinary," he replied sincerely, admiring not just the dish, but the complex and fascinating woman who had created it. That night, in the intimacy of their home, after putting Patricia to bed and listening to her endless stories about princesses who were also chefs and saved princes with problems, Michael and Emily sat on their favorite terrace as on so many other nights. "Do you know what day it is today?" he asked, serving 2 glasses of American red wine from a vineyard they had helped establish in the region. Emily smiled. Of course she knew. 6 years since a broken plate changed our lives. 6 years since I accidentally entered a kitchen and found the way home, he corrected, intertwining his fingers with hers. Under the same starry sky that had witnessed their first kiss, their marriage proposal, so many significant moments, they silently renewed the promise they had made to each other, to continue building together, to continue transforming pain into beauty, to continue proving that scars, when shared with love, aren't marks of weakness, but maps that lead to true home. That real love, they discovered, isn't perfect or simple. It's complex, imperfect, and requires daily work. But when built on foundations of honesty, respect, and understanding, it becomes the most transformative force in the universe, a force capable of healing old wounds, melting frozen hearts, converting 2 broken people into a complete family. And that, more than any professional success, than any public recognition, was their greatest creation. A love that had been born among tears and broken plates, and that now nourished not only their hearts, but the heart of a little girl who would grow up knowing that no matter how dark the path seems, there's always the possibility of finding light, especially when we least expect it and where we least imagine it. The soft breeze of dusk in Miami carried the aroma of key lime pie and coconut shrimp rising from the beach stands, mixing with the jasmine perfume Emily had planted in the hanging gardens of the top floor of the Roots building. 10 years had passed since that night when a broken plate changed the destiny of 2 lost souls. And now, at 35, Emily Johnson Davis contemplated the empire they had built together, not just of restaurants and businesses, but of love, family, and purpose. The main terrace of the gastronomic complex offered a panoramic view of the Magic City, and it was there she used to take refuge in moments of reflection. Patricia Hope, now 5 years old, played in the small garden they had created especially for her, her crystalline laughter echoing. Among the aromatic plants, the girl already knew how to identify by names and culinary properties. "Mommy, look! The basil is flowering!" the little girl shouted, her braids bouncing as she ran between the flower beds, her yellow dress fluttering like petals in the wind. She definitely had Emily's green eyes, but Michael's tireless curiosity and silent determination. "Basil, my love," Emily corrected with a smile, approaching her daughter. "And you're right, they're beautiful. Do you know what that means?" "That we can make that special bruschetta for Daddy," Patricia exclaimed, clapping her hands. Even so young, she already demonstrated a natural intuition for flavors and combinations that left professional chefs impressed. The sound of familiar footsteps made Emily turn. Michael was climbing the terrace stairs with 2 glasses of iced coconut water, his day suit replaced by a light shirt and casual pants. At 43, some silver streaks were beginning to appear at his temples, which only accentuated the intensity of his blue eyes and gave him an even more distinguished air. "My 2 favorite women conspiring in the kitchen again," he joked, handing Emily a glass and bending down to receive Patricia's enthusiastic hug. "Daddy, Mummy said we can make bruschetta with the new basil," the girl announced, clinging to her father's legs with the strength of someone who had never doubted being loved unconditionally. "Basil," Michael corrected automatically, winking at Emily over their daughter's head. This had become a family joke, Patricia deliberately mispronouncing some words just to see her parents' amused reactions. While the little girl returned to her botanical explorations, Michael approached Emily, wrapping her around the waist in a gesture that had become natural over the years, but still awakened butterflies in her stomach. "How was the meeting with the Japanese investors?" she asked, leaning against his chest. "Better than we expected. They want not just franchises in Tokyo and Osaka, but also to implement our social responsibility program there. They were fascinated by the story of how we started," Michael replied, gently kissing the top of her head. "Especially when I told them about a certain brave waitress who broke a plate and conquered the heart of a cynical businessman." "I didn't conquer anything," Emily protested, turning in his arms to face him. "You were the one who saved me that night." "We saved each other," he corrected, caressing her cheek with his thumb. "And we continue doing it every day." It was true. What had begun as an inexplicable attraction had transformed into a partnership that transcended the romantic and professional. Together, they had built not just a gastronomic empire, but a new way of doing business, one that prioritized people, traditions, and sustainability above pure profit. The Roots Group now operated 47 restaurants in 12 countries, each maintaining the essence of regional American cuisine while adapting to local tastes. More importantly, the Roots Foundation had granted scholarships to more than 2,000 young people from disadvantaged communities, many of whom now occupied leadership positions in the company. "Mummy, Daddy, come see!" Patricia shouted, interrupting the intimate moment. She was pointing to the horizon where the sun began its golden descent toward the sea. The 3 positioned themselves at the terrace balustrade, Patricia in the middle, each hand firmly holding her. Parents. It was a daily ritual, watching the sunset together, a moment of gratitude and connection that Emily made sure to preserve no matter how busy they were. "Tell me the story again, Mommy," Patricia asked, as she did almost every night. "The story of how you 2 met." Emily smiled, never tiring of narrating that story to her daughter, always adapting details to be appropriate for the girl's age. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who worked very, very hard, but who sometimes felt very lonely," she began, her voice taking on the melodious tone she always used for storytelling. "One day, she was so nervous that she dropped some plates and became very sad because she thought she had done something terrible. But then the prince appeared," Patricia completed, her eyes shining with the familiarity of the narrative. "He wasn't exactly a prince," Emily continued, smiling at Michael. He was a man who also felt lonely, even though he had many things, and when he saw the sad girl, something inside his heart said, "I want to help her." "And they fell in love and lived happily ever after," Patricia exclaimed, clapping her hands. "They fell in love, yes," Michael confirmed, picking up his daughter, "but happily ever after is something they work to build every day, because true love isn't magic, little one. It's choice. It's deciding every morning to be kind, understanding and present for those we love." Patricia nodded solemnly, although Emily knew it would take several years for the girl to fully understand the depth of those words. When the last strip of sun disappeared on the horizon, Michael took Patricia inside for bath and bedtime story, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts on the terrace. She took from her pocket an envelope that had arrived that morning, a letter from Sarah, now regional director of the company in New York, announcing her own engagement to Jake. The letter was full of gratitude, telling how the example of Emily and Michael's relationship had inspired so many people around them to believe in true love again. "Sometimes I wonder where we'd be if I hadn't broken that plate," she murmured to herself, putting away the letter. "We probably would have found each other some other way," Michael said, returning to the terrace. "Some connections are inevitable." He approached from behind, wrapping her in his arms in a silent dance they had perfected over the years. "Did Patricia fall asleep?" she asked, "after making me?" "Promise we'll make tapioca pancakes with dulce de leche tomorrow," Michael laughed. "Our daughter definitely inherited your refined taste for carbohydrates." They remained silent for a few moments, just appreciating each other's company and the city lights that gradually turned on. It was in these moments of quiet that Emily most felt the magnitude of the journey they had traveled. "I got an interesting call today," Michael said eventually, "from a documentary producer at Netflix. They want to make a program about our story, how two people from different worlds built not just a successful business, but changed how American cuisine is viewed internationally." Emily made a face. "You know how I feel about unnecessary exposure." "I know," he agreed. "But think about the impact. How many people could be inspired by our story? How many young people from disadvantaged communities could see that it's possible to change their lives through education and hard work?" It was typical of Michael to always think of the greater good, of the responsibility they had to use their platform to inspire others. It was one of the things Emily loved most about him, how his vision always went beyond the personal. "I'll think about it," she promised, "but only if we can control how our story is told, especially the parts about Patricia." "Obviously," Michael assured, "our daughter will always be our #1 priority." Emily's phone vibrated with a text message. It was from her mother, Mrs. Patricia, now 62, and living comfortably in an apartment near theirs in Miami. "Grandma wants to know if she can take Patricia to baseball practice tomorrow," Emily said, showing the message to Michael. "She's determined to teach our daughter about all-important American traditions. As long as she doesn't teach her to make that special hot dog of hers," Michael joked, remembering a recent incident where Mrs. Patricia had tried to introduce Patricia to the concept of secret seasonings, using a pinch of beer in a dessert sauce. The sound of soft music coming from the apartment below reminded Emily that it was salsa night at the main restaurant. One of the most recent innovations had been transforming Roots into a complete cultural space, with dance classes, live music nights, and culinary workshops for the community. "Want to go down to dance?" Michael suggested, extending his hand in a perfect imitation of the gesture he had made 10 years before, when he helped her get up from the restaurant floor. "Always," Emily replied, accepting his hand with the same tremor of expectation she had felt since the first day. They went down to the main hall, where about 30 couples of all ages danced under soft lights and decoration that mixed colonial American elements with contemporary touches. The space had been designed by Michael personally, every detail reflecting the philosophy of union between tradition and modernity that defined everything they did. On the dance floor, Emily let herself be carried by the familiar rhythm, their bodies moving in synchrony, developed through years of practice. Michael had insisted on dance classes right in the first year of marriage, claiming that a couple that dances together stays together. "Remember the first time we danced?" Michael murmured in her ear while gracefully spinning her. "On our honeymoon in Buenos Aires," she replied, smiling at the memory. "You stepped on my foot at least 10 times. I was nervous." He admitted, "I wanted to impress my new wife." "You impress me every day," Emily said sincerely, looking into his eyes. "Not for what you do, but for who you are." The music changed to something slower, and they moved closer, dancing as if they were the only ones in the hall. It was in these moments that Emily remembered why they had worked so well together, not despite their differences, but because of them. Where she was impulsive, he was calculated. Where he was reserved, she was warm. Together, they created perfect balance. "I have a surprise for you," Michael said while they danced. "What kind of surprise?" Emily asked suspiciously. Michael had the habit of making big romantic gestures without prior warning. "The kind that involves a trip," he said mysteriously. "Remember you always talked about wanting to visit the land of your African ancestors?" Emily's heart jumped. It was a dream she had mentioned a few times, connecting with the African roots of her family better. Understanding the origins of Southern cuisine she loved so much. "Michael, you didn't," she began. 3 weeks in Senegal and Ivory Coast," he confirmed with a smile. "Everything's already organized. We'll visit traditional markets, learn ancestral culinary techniques, meet communities that preserve these traditions, and Patricia comes with us. I think it's time she understands where her cultural heritage comes from." Tears formed in Emily's eyes. After all these years, Michael still managed to surprise her with his attention to her deepest dreams. "When?" she asked, barely able to contain her emotion. "Next month. It coincides with Patricia's school vacation and the restaurant's quietest period." Emily kissed him right there on the dance floor, not caring who might be watching. It was a kiss full of gratitude, love, and the renewed promise that they would continue discovering the world together. Later that night, after all the customers had left and the restaurant was silent, Emily and Michael made their nightly rounds, a tradition they had maintained since the opening of the first routes. They walked through the empty halls, checking details, appreciating the space they had created together. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real," Emily confessed, while adjusting one of the orchids decorating the main hall. "What specifically?" Michael asked, noting some observations for the morning cleaning crew. "Everything. This life, this love, this family. 10 years ago, I was broken. Financially, emotionally, spiritually. I thought my destiny was to fight alone forever." Michael stopped what he was doing and approached her. "You were never broken, Emily. You were waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right opportunity to flourish. And were you also waiting?" "I was hiding," he admitted. "Hiding behind walls I built to protect myself. You taught me that too much protection can become prison." They walked to the main kitchen, where Emily always felt most at home. Even empty and silent, it pulsed with the energy of thousands of meals, prepared with love, of dreams realized through flavors and aromas. "Want to know a secret?" Emily said, approaching the exact spot where she had broken the first plate in that restaurant where she worked so many years ago. "Always," Michael replied, intrigued. "Sometimes, when I'm here alone preparing a special dish, I still feel that tremor in my hands, that fear of not being good enough, of disappointing people." Michael looked at her with surprise. After all these years of success, international awards and recognition, it was still hard for him to imagine she could doubt herself. "And what do you do when you feel that?" he asked. "I remember you extending your hand to me that night. I remember that sometimes we need to accept help to discover our own strength. And then I cook with even more love, because I know each dish is an opportunity to touch someone's heart, just like you touched mine." Michael pulled her close, kissing her forehead with tenderness. "You touch hearts every day, Emily, not just through food, but through who you are. Our daughter is growing up knowing it's possible to be strong and gentle at the same time, successful and humble, confident and vulnerable. They went up to the apartment attached to the restaurant they kept for late nights like this, when they didn't want to wake Patricia coming home very late. It was a small but cozy space with a king-size bed, a small kitchen and a balcony overlooking the sea. While preparing for sleep, Emily reflected on the conversation they had had with Patricia earlier about working to be happy every day. It was a lesson they themselves were still learning, that love wasn't a destination, but a daily journey of conscious choices. "Michael," she said as they lay down. Thank you. For what this time?" he asked, accustomed to these spontaneous expressions of gratitude she made regularly. "For never giving up on us, even when I was afraid and ran away, even when the past seemed bigger than the future, even on difficult days when we were building all this and sometimes barely had time to talk properly." "Thank you," he replied, pulling her into his arms, "for teaching me that vulnerability is courage, not weakness, for showing me that success without purpose is empty, for giving me a family I didn't even know I wanted." Falling asleep in each other's arms had become a sacred ritual, a moment of reconnection after days full of responsibilities and external demands. It was when they remembered that, beneath all professional achievements and family responsibilities, they were still those two wounded hearts who had found each other on a rainy night and decided to heal together. The next morning, Emily woke before the alarm, as she always did. It was 5:30 a.m., and she had a precious hour of silence before Patricia woke up and the day filled with activities. It was her moment of meditation, planning and connection with herself. She went down to the restaurant kitchen and prepared a special coffee, a blend of beans she had discovered during a trip to Colombia the previous year. While the aroma spread through the silent kitchen, she opened her personal recipe notebook, where she noted not just ingredients and techniques, but reflections on life, family, and dream. 10 years, she wrote at the top of a new page. 10 years since my real life began. Today, I'm grateful for. The list that followed filled 2 entire pages, from obvious things like Michael and Patricia to small but significant details like the sound of her daughter's laughter, the smell of Michael's hair after shower, the proud letters she received from Foundation alumni who now had their own restaurants. When Michael came down at 6:30, he found her exactly where he expected, in the kitchen, surrounded by fresh ingredients, working on a new recipe, while the morning sun painted everything golden. "Good morning, my love," he said, kissing her nape while she cut fresh basil. "Good morning. I'm testing a variation of our cornbread with herbs," she explained, offering him a small sample. "What do you think?" Michael tasted thoughtfully, his eyes closing while savoring the flavor layers. "Perfect for Sunday brunch," he decided. "It has something special I can't identify." "Love," Emily said simply. "It's always love." And it really was. After 10 years together, Emily had learned that the secret ingredient of everything they did, whether in the kitchen, business, or family, was the unconditional love they had built together. Not fairy tale love, perfect and effortless, but real love, worked on, that strengthens with each challenge overcome together. Patricia appeared in the kitchen at 7 key, like a small hurricane of morning energy, hair disheveled and still in pajamas. "Mommy, Daddy, I dreamed we were a family of chefs and traveled all over the world teaching people to cook with joy." Emily and Michael exchanged a meaningful look. Their daughter, even so young, already captured the essence of who they were and what they represented. "Maybe that dream will come true someday," Michael said, lifting Patricia onto the kitchen counter. "But first, how about helping Mommy finish this special bread?" And so, like on so many other mornings, the three worked together in the kitchen, Patricia helping more than hindering, but always with the radiant smile of someone who knew herself loved and valued. It was in these simple moments that Emily remembered they had built much more than a gastronomic empire. They had built a home, a legacy, living proof that sometimes when we break, we discover our pieces can reorganize into an even more beautiful configuration. The broken plate had been the beginning, but the true story was what they had built with the fragments: a family, a purpose, a love that would continue growing and inspiring others for generations to come. And on that golden morning of sun, surrounded by the aroma of fresh bread and the sound of her family's laughter, Emily knew with absolute certainty that all past suffering had been worth it to reach that moment of imperfect perfection, but completely true. Life hadn't become perfect, it had become real. And that, she discovered, was much better than any fairy tale. If this story of love and overcoming touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to discover more stories like this. Tell us in the comments what city and country you watched us from enjoying this story, and what other themes you'd like us to address in our next narratives. Your opinion is what we value most.